Okay, so you want to own a Ford Transit, not the SUV everyone recognizes, not the two-door dream with the exhaust note, a van. White, mostly, boxy, always. It promises something almost nothing else on this channel promises. Not status, but income. Your name on the door, your own schedule, a business that scales with the hours you drive. You can hear it, the flat idle of a 3.5-liter V6, since Ford killed the diesel option years ago, and the hollow rattle of an empty cargo box on the way to your first stop. That rattle is the sound of opportunity. It's also the sound of overhead, and somewhere in Ford's own legal filings, a fight over that very transmission. Whether it covers your van is worth holding on to. Here's the subversion nobody puts in the brochure. The fantasy sold to you isn't a vehicle, it's a business, and a business comes with a balance sheet. A base Transit starts at $49,495. A loaded one clears $61,900 before any shelving gets bolted in. Over 5 real years, true cost runs somewhere between 3 and 4 times that sticker number. And the question that decides whether this works has almost nothing to do with how many packages you deliver. It's about who holds the risk once you sign. There are 3 doors you can walk through here, and which one you pick changes almost everything downstream. Door 1 is new, off the lot, financed. The version most first-time owner-operators actually choose because a lender wants a warranty behind the collateral. Door 2 is used, 3 to 5 years old, already through its steepest depreciation, cheaper to buy and more expensive to gamble on. Door 3 is the chassis cab, a stripped frame and cab combination sold bare, meant for a bodybuilder to bolt a custom box or flatbed onto later, the choice of contractors who already know exactly what they're building. This is the story of Door 1, a new Transit 150 low roof, financed because that is the path most people watching this actually walk. Here's where it gets interesting. The Transit itself is not a niche choice. It is, by a wide margin, the best-selling van in the country. Ford sold 140,128 of them in the U.S. in 2024, up 15% year-over-year, according to Ford's own sales figures reported by Ford Authority. In the fourth quarter of that year alone, it captured a segment-best 39% share, and combined with its E-Series sibling, Ford accounted for 52% of every full-size van sold in America. Ram's ProMaster trailed at 24,866 units that quarter. Chevrolet's Express and GMC's Savana trailed further still. Mercedes-Benz doesn't even publish Sprinter sales separately anymore, which tells you something about how that fight is going. 11 configurations exist inside the Transit lineup alone. 3 payload classes badged 150, 250, and 350. 3 roof heights, 2 wheelbases. That's not customer choice. That's a manufacturer making sure there is no excuse to buy anything else. The number on the window sticker is the smallest lie in this entire transaction. A FIMED 50 low roof starts at $49,495. Move up to a 350 high roof and it's $55,095. Add all-wheel drive, the HD suspension package, or the high roof on the 350 chassis, and the top of the lineup lands at $61,900, according to Edmunds and Ford's own configurator. None of that includes an upfit, the aftermarket build-out of shelving, ladder racks, or refrigeration that turns an empty steel box into an actual tool for an actual trade, which routinely adds several $1,000s more before the van does a single day of work. None of it includes the sales tax, title, and registration fees that vary by state and add somewhere between 3 and 9% on top. Then there's financing, and this is where the fantasy quietly changes hands. Ford does maintain a dedicated commercial financing arm, Ford Pro FinSimple, built for genuine fleets buying in volume, with incentive programs layered on top. But a single owner-operator financing 1 or 2 vans rarely qualifies for real fleet pricing. Instead, you're financed like anyone else, through the dealership's own finance office, at whatever rate your credit and their relationships produce. Advertised starting rates for business auto loans span a wide range. Navy Federal quotes 4.09% on new vehicles. Bank of America advertises rates starting at 5.89%, and lenders working with thinner credit files, like Elise, start around 9% and climb from there. On a $50,000 van financed over 60 months, The gap between the best rate and the worst rate is not cosmetic. It's somewhere between $4,000 and $9,000 in interest alone, paid before the van has earned a dollar. Read that again. The van hasn't moved yet, and the financing terms have already decided how much of your future income belongs to someone else. And there's a number buried in the fine print of one delivery giant's own recruiting materials that explains a great deal about why owner-operators keep signing up despite a failure rate nobody puts in the brochure. That's coming later, because it's where a genuinely large share of the real money hides. Depreciation, the silent partner who takes his cut every single morning whether the van left the driveway or not, is where the real arithmetic of transit ownership actually lives. Kelley Blue Book's data on a 2023 Transit 350 cargo van tells the story cleanly. Original MSRP, $49,255. Current resale value, 3 years later, $30,700 retail, or $25,600 if you're trading it in rather than selling it privately. That's $18,555 gone, 37% of the purchase price, in 36 months, an average of roughly $6,185 a year, whether the van sat parked or ran 200 miles a day. And here's the part nobody tells you. Kelley Blue Book places that depreciation curve in the 25th to 75th percentile among 2023 vans and minivans. Not the worst, not the best. Exactly average. You didn't buy a van that holds value unusually well. You bought the van that sells the most, which turns out to be a very different thing. Depreciation on a work vehicle behaves differently than depreciation on a status vehicle, and that difference is the entire point of this exercise. And that Kelley Blue Book curve assumes ordinary mileage. A Transit running a daily delivery route racks up considerably more miles a year than the average passenger vehicle, and mileage is one of the fastest ways to drag resale value down faster than the standard curve predicts. Nobody buys a Transit hoping it appreciates. It's bought as a tool, and tools get consumed. But a consumed tool still shows up on a balance sheet, and the moment you try to sell the business built around it, not just the van, the business, that $6,185 a year erosion becomes someone else's negotiating leverage. Ask anyone trying to exit an operation early. The buyer isn't purchasing your income. The buyer is purchasing a depreciating asset with your income temporarily attached to it. The van is not the asset. The van is the meter running underneath the business. Running a Transit costs more than running the average Ford, and the average Ford is already not cheap. So where does that money actually go? RepairPal puts the brand's overall reliability at 3.5 out of 5, 21st out of 32 ranked brands, and pegs the Transit 150's average annual repair bill at $972, against a $775 brand average across the rest of the Ford lineup. Ford owners generally visit a shop only about 0.3 times a year, but RepairPal's data also shows roughly a 15% chance that any given repair lands in the severe category, the kind that doesn't get fixed with a fluid top-off. Fuel is its own quiet drain. The EPA rates the 3.5-liter V6 AWD Transit 150 at 16 miles per gallon combined, 14 city, 19 highway, and a real-world test loop by Cars.com actually beat that slightly, at 17.6 miles per gallon. But that number came from an unladen van on a favorable route. Strap several hundred pounds of cargo behind the driver's seat on a daily delivery loop and expect that figure to fall, not rise. The heavier configurations in the lineup don't even carry an official EPA rating anymore. They're exempt from mandatory testing above a certain gross vehicle weight rating, GVWR, the certified operating ceiling that decides which fuel economy rules even apply, which is a polite way of saying nobody's required to tell you the real number. Then insurance, which behaves less like a fixed cost and more like a verdict on how you actually use the van. Insured as a personal vehicle, average premiums run around $155 a month, somewhere between $2,100 and $258 a year. Insured commercially, the range widens dramatically depending on classification. A local trade or service van runs $100 to $250 a month. Courier or last-mile delivery work runs $200 to $450. For-hire cargo work runs somewhere between $250 and $600, and a financed van carrying seven-figure liability limits can run $350 a month or more. First-year commercial operators, anyone without an established driving history under a business name, typically eat a 10 to 40% premium on top of whatever base rate they're quoted, a tax on simply being new. Here's the trap, and it's a layered one. Across 3 generations of this van, a pattern of known failure points has built up, documented by mechanics and owner communities who work on these vehicles daily, even where the official recall record stays quiet. First-generation vans, built between 2015 and 2019, are known for EcoBoost turbo intercooler hoses that crack or blow off their clamps somewhere between 30,000 and 80,000 miles, a $150 to $600 fix, and for a 6R80 automatic transmission prone to harsh, delayed shifts in that same generation, a repair that can run anywhere from $300 to $3,500 depending on what's actually failed inside it. Second-generation vans, 2020 through 2022, carry owner reports of 10R80 transmission shudder showing up somewhere between 10,000 and 60,000 miles, with repair costs spanning $200 to $4,000. The current generation has its own signature, premature ignition coil failure, typically somewhere between 30,000 and 70,000 miles, running $300 to $700 to correct. Now, the part that matters more than any single figure. Ford does face a real class action lawsuit over 10R80 transmission problems, filed in Massachusetts in April 2023, according to court records compiled by Class Action.org, alleging the transmission shifts harshly and erratically, and that Ford knew about it. But read the actual filing, and the Transit isn't on it. That lawsuit names the Expedition, the Mustang, the Ranger, the F-150, and the Lincoln Navigator. Transit owners reporting the identical symptom have no seat at that particular table, which means whatever legal leverage other Ford owners eventually win, it doesn't automatically extend to the van parked in your driveway. That's the transmission fight from the opening minute. It's real. It just isn't yours. And then there's an ambush that has nothing to do with the drivetrain at all. Catalytic converter theft. A job that can take a few minutes for someone with a battery saw and no conscience, running somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000, sometimes more, to replace, with a $250 to $500 deductible standing between you and full reimbursement even when the policy covers it. High-clearance vehicles make an easy target. A cargo van, sitting tall on its suspension in a dark parking lot, is not an inconvenient shape to work under. Can the Transit actually pay for itself? This is where the manufacturer, and increasingly the logistics giants who use vehicles like this one as free capital, want you asking the wrong question. The most visible path is Amazon's Delivery Service Partner Program, DSP, in the industry's own shorthand, which recruits people to run branded last-mile delivery fleets using Amazon-approved vans, the Transit chief among them. Amazon's own recruiting materials advertise annual revenue potential of $1 million to $4 mine deeper, and annual profit potential of $75,000 to $300,000, on a fleet sized somewhere between 20 and 40 vans. Read the fine print underneath those numbers, though, and Amazon calls them projections only, explicitly not based on actual results, with no guarantee attached. That disclaimer is doing an enormous amount of work. Compare the exit math to the more established alternative. When a DSP owner wants to sell the business, according to analysis from Root Consultant, a firm that tracks last-mile delivery economics, it typically sells for somewhere between 25 and 55% of annual revenue, call it 40% on average, at 2 to 3.5 times annual earnings. A FedEx ground route, by contrast, sells for 60 to 85% of revenue at 4 to 5 times earnings. Same basic function, driving other people's packages to other people's doors, priced by the market at roughly half the multiple. The market isn't confused. It's pricing in exactly how much control the operator actually has, which in Amazon's case is very little. For scale, a 20-van FedEx ground operation, the benchmark DSP owners are implicitly chasing, generates roughly $2 million in annual revenue and $300,000 in annual profit, about $100,000 of revenue per vehicle at a margin somewhere between 10 and 20%. That's the ceiling most DSP owners are told is within reach. Whether it's actually reachable is a different question entirely, and the answer to that question is not really about how hard you drive. So who actually profits from a Ford Transit? The obvious answer, Ford, is only the shallowest layer. Selling you the van is barely where Ford's business model lives anymore. The deeper answer sits in the dealership's finance office, where the average F&I profit per vehicle retailed, the loan markup, the extended service plan, the paint protection nobody asked for, all bundled under one finance office, hit $2,501 in the third quarter of 2025, up 5.2% year-over-year, the highest level in 5 years, according to the Hague Partners report on dealership economics. Front-end profit on the vehicle sale itself has been shrinking for years. F&I is where that lost margin quietly relocated. But the deepest layer is the one buried in the fine print you skimmed past earlier. Amazon's DSP program does not own a single van in most of these operations. It does not carry the debt. It is not on the hook for the $18,555 that depreciation takes over 3 years, or the insurance premium, or the workers' compensation claims when something goes wrong. It structures a business relationship where an individual owner assumes every asset, every liability, and every employee, while Amazon retains the one thing that actually matters, the right to end the contract at will, without severance, without warning, and often, as the record shows, with a settlement offer contingent on the terminated owner signing away the right to talk about it. That's the number buried in the fine print, not a dollar figure, a structure. Amazon gets the delivery network without owning the depreciation curve underneath it. You get the delivery network's depreciation curve, and Amazon keeps the option to walk away from the relationship whenever the math stops working in its favor. The Transit isn't really the product here. The willingness to absorb someone else's risk is. In March 2020, a Boston area operator, identified in reporting only as Jim, the name he gave the journalist who told his story, signed on as an Amazon delivery service partner and built something real: 30 vans, 86 employees, 3 million packages delivered in the first year alone, according to reporting by Vice. By any operational measure, this wasn't a failing business. This was the fantasy executed. In July 2021, Amazon terminated the contract. No warning, no phase-out period, no transition plan. There were no rumors, no business coach saying, "Hey, you need to plan for this," Jim told the reporter. This would be like someone walking into your business and shutting it down. He was left owing $23,996 in workers' compensation claims for his former employees, on top of a $1,800 a month apartment lease, a $3,200 a month lease on the lot where his vans parked, a $1,200 a month office, and a $350 a month parking spot. All obligations signed in good faith around a contract that no longer existed. Amazon offered a $10,000 separation payment, conditional on Jim signing a non-disclosure agreement. Months later, he was diagnosed with a heart condition. He wasn't alone. A Portland, Oregon operator identified as Randy ran the same program on the same terms, launched in April 2020, terminated in February 2021, and came out the other side having drained $80,000 in personal savings, carrying an estimated $90,000 in remaining debt, and holding a $34,120 van damage invoice from Element Fleet, Amazon's own leasing partner. "Getting this contract ripped out completely bankrupted me," he said. "I had nothing to my name after I moved back." Read that again. Neither man's failure shows up in Amazon's advertised revenue projections. Neither shows up in a depreciation table either. They show up in bankruptcy filings, which is a very different kind of paperwork. Picture a single owner-operator running one Transit 150, not 30 vans. The size of business most people watching this are actually weighing. In a good year, a steady local delivery contract generating roughly $100,000 in gross revenue, in line with the industry's own per-vehicle benchmark. Repairs land near RepairPal's $972 average. A properly classified commercial policy runs close to $3,600. Fuel, at the higher mileage a real delivery route racks up, lands near $9,500. Financing, principal and interest on that $50,000 van, cost roughly $11,000 for the year, and depreciation quietly subtracts its usual $6,185, whether anyone notices or not. Added up and the costs come to $31,257, net, before taxes, close to $68,743. A real, livable outcome for the effort involved. Now change almost nothing about the effort and watch what a bad year does to the same van, driven by the same person, for the same number of hours. The contract renews at a smaller volume. Revenue drops to $70,000. The 10R80 shutter that started at 40,000 miles turns into the $4,000 end of that transmission repair range, pushing repairs to $4,972. A catalytic converter disappears from a parking lot overnight, and the $500 deductible arrives the same month. The insurer, reacting to the claim, bumps the policy to $4,700. Fuel and financing don't move, still $9,500, $11,000. Depreciation doesn't pause to notice any of it, still $6,185. Total costs, $36,357. Net, $33,643. Same driver, same hours, same van. A gap of $35,100 between the good year and the bad one, nearly a full second income, separated only by variance nobody put in the brochure. You signed the papers. The badge on the door still says your business, and somewhere behind you, in an empty cargo box on the drive home, that same hollow rattle is still there. The sound that once meant opportunity now just sounds like the space where the profit was supposed to be. The van was never the business. The business was whoever got to keep the risk on someone else's books.